thanks for joining us. My name is Ryan Hirsch, and I'm the Product Marketing Manager for ER Studio, the premier solution for enterprise data modeling and architecture. Today, we have a really exciting topic in which our guests will be discussing modern data platforms. Joining us for this conversation is Jamie Knowles, Director of Product for ER Studio. Jamie's been in the modeling industry for over 25 years, managing products for enterprise architecture, data modeling, data governance, and business process. Also joining us is Madison Schott. Madison has been in the data space for 8 years, 6 of which have been specifically in analytics engineering. Madison has built modern data stacks from the ground up at companies like Capital One, Wink, and Kit. She's the author of the Learn Analytics Engineering newsletter, where she shares tutorials and best practices for modern data stack tools, data teams, and data modeling. She currently works as an analytics engineering consultant, helping companies implement better data processes for creating quality, scalable data systems. So yeah, we'll jump in here pretty soon. I just want to let you know, if you do have any questions during the conversation, please put them in that chat box, and then we'll save time at the end to answer those questions. Any we don't get to, we will follow up via email. Also, this recording will be sent to you via email within the next couple days, and this will also be posted on our events page at erstudio.com. So that being said, we're having a little bit of technical issues with Jamie's camera, so he's just going to kind of talk via audio, but obviously we have Madison here sharing her screen. So yeah, we'll go ahead and dive in.
I think for those that know me, not having my camera on is probably a good thing, but apologies for the technical problem there. Cool, let's get started then. So, as you all know, ER Studio, it's a data modeling tool. It allows you to design and document data assets such as databases and now JSON files. I think many of our customers are using it to design application databases. That's the history and the tradition of what we do. And many of you are using it to design data warehouses and lakehouses. So that's the sort of the background of ER Studio. Today, though, we're going to talk about modern data stacks. So this is a newer idea. So we want to talk about how they're evolving and why data modeling is so critical to them. And there's lots of conversations going on that I've heard. So, oh, is data modeling still relevant? And how does it apply to all of this? Okay, so Madison, for those who don't know you, do you want to share us a little journey about your journey into building modern platforms?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started out my career at Capital One as a data engineer, and there I really focused on DevOps and kind of the more engineering infrastructure work. And I quickly realized that as a data person, I really cared about the impact that I was making to the business. And that's kind of when I discovered this career of analytics engineering and was introduced to the idea of data transformation and data modeling. And that's when I started at a company called Wink, which was a small e-commerce wine subscription startup. And I was pretty much the first data hire there, and I built out our entire modern data stack from the ground up. So really focusing from moving a lot of our SQL data transformations that were in this BI layer into an actual data transformation tool, and really building out the data warehouse using Snowflake, using Fivetran for data ingestion, dbt for data modeling. And that was kind of the first time that I really thought about the business impact that I was having as an engineer in the data space. And that definitely taught me a lot about just like working with stakeholders and building really with the business in mind, rather than just kind of building what you think the business wants. And then after that, I transitioned into a senior analytics engineering role at Kit, which I think that role taught me even more the importance of data modeling, really like thinking about all of the business problems and designing scalable data infrastructure, rather than just kind of like taking ad hoc SQL queries and what was in the BI tool and just like moving them over into a data model, but like actually thinking strategically about things from the very beginning. And that role definitely taught me a lot about not just like different technologies and tools, but like actually thinking about what you're doing and the potential impact that it has.
Nice. But as an old guy, there's lots of sort of words there that I sort of understand. So you're talking a lot about analytics, talking about data warehouses, great. But things seem to be changing, don't they? We're now talking about things called modern data stacks. So what is one of those, and how is it different today from when you first started?
Yeah, so I think when I think of a modern data stack, I think of first like everything being on the cloud. I also think of definitely a lot of open source tools. I think that was something that wasn't really available to us before the modern data stack. So there's so many different tools that we can kind of take advantage of and like code out there on like GitHub that you're not necessarily like reinventing the wheel a lot of times, but just like the whole idea of a modern data stack is having like all of these different tools that exist on the cloud that can easily work together to essentially make data and analytics and engineering way easier than it was before and just more accessible to a ton of different companies and businesses, no matter what stage you're at.
All right, so the technologies have changed with cloud being a real focus. Have any of the goals of this changed?
Yeah, I think like accessibility is a huge thing. I think like data wasn't really a lot of things that many companies had available to them because, you know, you had to like host all of this infrastructure, which was super expensive, like having an on-prem data warehouse. And now like no matter your company size, you have the ability to harness your own data and take action and insights. And I think that's why the data industry is growing so much in popularity because companies are realizing like, hey, we actually have access to our own data and we can use it to make like really powerful decisions.
So the goals are pretty much the same then. We want to get good data from the organization and make it available for whoever needs it. Is it just accessibility on the cloud? Is that it? Is that the only change in goal?
Yeah, I mean, I think being able to, you know, have that data available to you, like also in like real time or just like every hour to make decisions is huge. I think, again, like this shift to modern data stacks and on cloud is making it more accessible to everyone and allowing companies to truly become data driven, which I think is the biggest thing.
So I guess then the ultimate goal is every good bit of data that an organization's got, we want all of that to be available in an accessible form. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess, I mean, that then presents risk to the organization. So where does data governance fit in?
Yeah, I think data governance needs to fit into every piece of the data stack. I think previously companies looked at data as like just the data team's responsibility, and something that I'm seeing more and more of is that everyone throughout the business and not just the data team like really needs to think about the way they're using data and accessing it, and that's something that again like the data team helps out with, but it really is the responsibility of everyone to kind of think about their actions and their impact on the data that they're producing and using. I think in my previous role, like HubSpot was something that we frequently used, and while a lot of people thought it was the data team's job to kind of like own HubSpot and protecting the quality of the data going in and out, like the sales team is essentially the one that's using HubSpot all the time at the end of the day. So like they need to think about how their actions are affecting data quality. And I think we're seeing that more and more is that like the data team can't just exist in a silo. Like everyone really needs to be educated on data literacy and like good data practices.
I think in the past, sort of governance was always a bit of an afterthought, wasn't it? It's sort of we'll build the warehouse, we'll get all the data in, and then the data governance team can sort of follow along behind and do whatever they do. Do you think that's changing?
Yeah, definitely. I think with like an emphasis on data quality, more and more teams are realizing that this is something that they kind of need to get ahead of rather than fix down the line. Because if you're not thinking about data quality and like protecting that in the beginning, then things are going to get a lot more messy and it's going to be kind of become like this ball of yarn that you have to unwind in the end, and that's just like creating essentially double the work for the data team. So like slowing down in the beginning to really focus on like, hey, who's going to have access to this data? What does this data need to look like? Even like things like PII, how do we protect this in the very beginning before bad things happen, and whether it gets in the wrong hand or like a business stakeholder, for example, accidentally has like the ability to manipulate data at the source and then no one realizes it. These are all things that can have really bad consequences downstream. So the more you think about it upfront, the more you can protect and not have to worry about then firefighting those issues in the future.
Love it, love it. So let's talk about design and architecture then. So if I was going to properly architect a modern data stack, how do I go about it?
Yeah, I think in the past, and this is a lesson that I learned, I think when I worked at Wink, is like when I first started out as an analytics engineer, I was kind of just focused on like all of these tools out there in the modern data stack. And I think that's a trap that a lot of people get into. It's like, let me just use these modern data stack cloud tools and like all of my problems will be fixed, but that's not necessarily how it should go. Like, of course, you should think about the tools that will help you get to where you want to go. So first, like starting with your end goals and like the resources that you have available and like which tools are going to help you get there. But then thinking about the business context, that everything comes back to the business. Like the tools that you use aren't your end goal. It's really like the problems that you're solving and like the data issues that you're trying to prevent in the long run. That should be kind of crafting your entire data strategy. And like with the idea of not just thinking about tools, you really want to be strategic and kind of think about how you want your data stack to scale in the long run and how you can actually build to support those business goals. So like instead of just taking your SQL code that's like in your BI layer and transferring it to like a data transformation tool, that's not really data modeling. You're just kind of moving the same code around. So you want to be strategic about how you're actually thinking about those models and like building them for where you want to go rather than just like moving things around the stack. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing sort of, I mean, going back to the sort of the old world of a warehouse. So a lot of it was really, right, we just want to smash out reports as quickly as possible.
Yep.
So yeah, let's just get whatever data we need for this report into the warehouse, get the report out, job done. And we're still seeing customers with that kind of strategy sort of ongoing. I mean, what do you say to them?
Yeah, I think that just ends up, again, like creating more issues in the long run. I think there's a few different things that I see. The biggest one is just inconsistency. Like if you're just kind of writing one-off queries and calling it a data model, it's not actually going to help you maintain that consistency throughout the different layers of your stack and into the BI layer because metric calculations are just going to vary. Like you really need to think about how you can centralize all of those things and have the different dimensions needed on that one in that one data model to then help scale out. So like inconsistency is the biggest thing. And if you have any changes, like you're not going to be able to effectively track where those changes need to be made if you're just like writing a bunch of queries and not thinking about how one model can be used in multiple places downstream. So that's the biggest thing. And then that also kind of trickles down into like trust. You're not going to be maintaining trust with stakeholders if things are inconsistent and wrong. And like the entire goal of data modeling is to like have that trust, have that consistency, and maintaining that quality.
Love it. So misconceptions about data modeling. I mean, everyone says, well, this is just going to slow us down. So you're talking about scalability. I mean, there's a great slide I've seen from Martin Falworth that talks about it applies to any kind of system. Sort of, yeah, without good architecture, I can start off quick and deliver quick, but then as things get more complex over time, the rate that you're delivering new stuff slows down. Whereas starting off slow with some good architecture slows you down initially, but then you just keep on accelerating over time. I mean, do you think that's still true for data stacks?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think every company that I've joined as an analytics engineer, it's usually at this pivotal point with data at the company where like they've had a team of data analysts that have just been creating these reports, creating these dashboards, and they're kind of finally at that next stage where they're ready to scale and they've realized like, oh wow, we don't have an infrastructure that we can actually trust and that's reliable and that business stakeholders depend on. Like they're really at that point where like, oh, like the business teams don't necessarily trust the data that we're producing. And they kind of have like all these different scattered reports and scattered dashboards. And they need to then take a step back, hire an analytics engineer to kind of fix the problem and really start from square one. So if they would have just started at a place where they like hired an analytics engineer or they thought about data modeling in the very beginning of their data journey, then they wouldn't have to go through this entire process of kind of peeling back all the layers of the things that they've created over like the last 3, 5, 10 years, no matter however long that company has been around. And they're essentially starting from square one, but it's harder than starting from square one because you're having to change the minds of all the stakeholders and everyone within the company and how they think about data. And they're also like comparing the new things to the old things, even though the old things were wrong. And it's a lot of politics that honestly goes into it. So like, yes, data modeling in the beginning, it takes a lot of time. Like you have to have a lot of thoughtful conversations with stakeholders, but like these conversations are going to have to be done eventually if you want accurate, reliable data that you can actually make decisions on and trust that they are going to have a positive impact on your business. So yes, you're slowing down in the beginning, but that then allows you to just have this reliable infrastructure and foundation that then you can continue building on and adding on and just like giving stakeholders more and more data that they can trust, where I don't think you have to worry about the politics then as much about like changing the way different people within the business are thinking about data and whether they trust it or not. It's less of that like relationship building, which really takes the longest time, especially when you lose trust. It's really hard to get it back. So data modeling in the beginning allows you then to do that.
Nice, yeah. And I think you said the phrase data modelers, oh sorry, stakeholders understanding of the data. And I think there's data models and there's data models. So we see some customers saying, okay, yeah, we're going to do data modeling. We're just going to create some nice physical models of each layer of the warehouse and kind of use the data modeling tool as an IDE for the database itself. Yeah, we're doing data modeling. But to me, I think data modeling's value really is at the sort of the business level, creating those beautiful logical models in business language, those conceptual models that allows the stakeholders to sort of collaborate and agree on what is this data. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think like you really want to start with the business process that you're looking at and then building a model around that then has all these different dimensions baked in. Whereas I think a lot of data teams, they think of data modeling as like just writing a one-off query, but like when you're coding a data model, it needs to be able to serve many different use cases and not just one specific use case for the business. So like you really need to think about how it's going to scale and how it's going to be used in many different places rather than just one place, which I think is the biggest difference with like real data modeling versus what a lot of data teams call data modeling.
I think it forces a lot of those hard conversations, those sort of discussions on what do you mean by data. Across the organization, we have lots of conversations about what is a customer or what is a product, but there can be a lot of sort of ambiguity and misunderstanding around that. So I mean, to me, data models can really help with some of that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of teams think that they're all on the same page with like what a user represents, what MRR is, and then the data team comes in and actually talks to them and they realize, oh wow, we actually all have very different ideas of what we think the same thing means, and we've all been measuring success of this metric in a different way, and this is probably why things aren't adding up across the business. And data modeling really allows you to bring all of those people into one room and have that discussion, and really make bigger impact across the business, not just through data, but just like in the way that we think about like these common measures of success.
Nice. So Colin, let me put you on the spot. So I'm the boss. I've got a gazillion dollars in my pocket, and so Madison, I want you to build me a beautiful modern data platform. In terms of the sort of the architecture and the data modeling side of things, where would you start?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on, I guess, the business goals. So I would just start by kind of looking at like where the gaps are in the current data platform, or if there is any at all, and then like talking with stakeholders to figure out what they really need. I think a lot of people when they're first starting out in their career, when data teams are first starting, will just kind of use tools without thinking about like what their goal really is. I see this a lot in like teams that use real-time data, for example. They don't necessarily talk to stakeholders about how often they need the data, and then they're like spending all this time and money trying to like stream this real-time data that's not actually necessary. So like first thing, just have a talk with people and like figure out what is really the core problems that need to be solved, and then build your stack around that. And again, like the biggest thing is probably the data transformation. So like actually think about what you want your data models to look like and really planning them strategically so that you can build those out in the very beginning and you aren't just like firefighting the whole time. And I wish I could give you an answer for like one data stack that would work for everyone, but the truth is it's a little bit different for everyone. And there's no like one tool that should be used, I guess. Like one data warehouse, a data warehouse that works for one team might not work for another. Data transformation tool that works for one team might not work with another, but like actually thinking about what the business needs and being strategic and working back from like the problem that you're trying to solve is the most important thing.
And I guess some nice sort of high level conceptual data models are a really good sort of vehicle to sort of help translate those requirements into something that's deliverable.
Absolutely. The more planning and the more documentation, the better, because I think that's what allows you to kind of see where the gaps are and where you really need to focus your attention.
Okay, cool. Something we're hearing a lot about nowadays is data as a product. So I think this was born from the original sort of Zhamak Dehghani data mesh approach, which is kind of fizzled away and has been replaced with this sort of fresher new data as a product concept. From your experience, what does this shift look like in practice?
Yeah, I think data as a product is really interesting because when you think of a product, you think of something that is built for an end user in mind. You think about something that you want to improve and iterate and listen to the end users on. And it's like, why wouldn't we think about data that way? You know, like our end users are the business that's making the decisions for at least most companies. Sometimes it's the consumer as well, but why wouldn't we build things for them in mind if they're going to be the ones using it and like making the most impactful decisions? Yeah, like it doesn't make sense to not think about it as a product. I think a lot of times, like, yeah, we haven't really thought about, you know, that process of iterating. It's like build something, be done with it. If it doesn't work, build something new. But like with data modeling, it's really about that life cycle of like, okay, let me start with an initial MVP, see how it works for the business user, take their feedback, and then continue iterating, whether it's adding things, changing a certain definition, and just like thinking about it as a life cycle that improves and continues to go on. And a lot of times too with data, I think we we build things and business users don't even end up using it. And it's like, well, what if a company built a product or a feature that users didn't actually end up using? Like, that wouldn't be very good for the company. You'd probably get rid of it. So like, you need to think about actually building things that your business stakeholders are going to want.
Yeah, I'd agree. And I think when you talk about it like that, it almost seems ridiculous that you wouldn't consider and treat data like a product. You've got some sort of assembly of raw materials that has value, it has risk, it has cost, and people want it. So why wouldn't you treat it in the same way as any other thing that fits that description? It's a product. And with a product, we're going to put against it a contract on how you're going to use it, the terms and conditions for its usage, and then a clear definition of what you're going to get if you buy or get this product. Yeah, I love it. So what sort of things do you think need to be in place before an organization can start this sort of process?
Honestly, I think the biggest thing is, again, like company politics, is just making sure like all parts of the company are on board and you're all kind of thinking about data the same way and the impact that data can make. It's really hard for a data team to be successful if like the execs aren't looking at data as like this tool that they can use, because if you're looking at data as a product, like it's really a full life cycle where everyone is involved in every step and you need to think about all these different moving pieces. So if people aren't on board with that in the end, like you're not going to be able to create a successful product and be able to have that like natural feedback cycle.
Yeah, hearts and minds, I agree. There's a lot of talk with data as a product about decentralization, sort of splitting the organization down into domains. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Because I mean, the past, we had a data warehouse that sits at the center, run by IT people. It's a technology-driven thing. But data as a product seems to be sort of changing that approach. What do you think?
Yeah, it's definitely a hard problem because if you're having a centralized data team and your company is like 10,000 people, it's like, well, how is that going to work? It's just not possible for one small team to kind of have all of that different domain knowledge that, you know, a 10,000 person company requires. But centralized data teams are really powerful in that they kind of have an idea of like how metric calculations look across the entire company, and how all of these different pieces work together. It's really important to have consistent definitions and just like things like consistent naming and like the way that you even write your code is really important. Like just simple data modeling principles, that kind of varies a lot from team to team. So like having a centralized team really helps make those things consistent, because it is harder to work as a data team or an engineer if things are inconsistent across the company, which is more common with decentralized teams. I think it's hard to do in a really effective way, but it kind of has to be done. I really like centralized teams for smaller organizations, but larger organizations, like it is a tricky problem because you have to be like very strategic about your governance strategy and like who has access to all that data, like what raw data you're even using, what needs to be used for like certain metrics. And it's a tough problem for sure. And I wish I had the answer, but I think like the most important thing is just like having those thoughts in mind of like, okay, this is a problem. When you decentralize it, like you still need to make sure that you're kind of talking to all these different data teams and like
Yes.
understanding how they're thinking about the data.
Yeah, I agree. I think I like the approach of finding out the organization, the different domains of the organization, finding the subject matter experts in those domains, the people that really understand the data, getting them sort of driving the bus, getting them working out what is the information of your domain. You define the governance policies around that information. Now you start thinking of the products that the rest of the organizations want to consume from you. I like that. I think that really, really works. But I think to your point, there is the danger of silos. I think there's quite a lot of information that spans domains, the notion of a customer or a product, those basic things. I think you've got to, as you say, ensure consistency across products within a domain, ensure consistency across the domains. And I've heard some companies say, well, that really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter to us that every domain has a completely different understanding of what a customer is. That's fine for us. But I think most organizations need to have that conversation internally and say, how much does this mean to us? And what are we going to do about it? But I think architecture can really help here. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. If you're thinking about things ahead of time and actually planning your architecture, and like maybe you do have a different definition of what a customer means across a single business, like that is definitely possible if you have a 10,000 plus person company, but you need to have that documented and you need to have that architecture written out and planned for so that there is a clear understanding within your specific domain and across the company.
I mean, you were saying sort of right at the start, a modern data platform, quality is a really important part of it. And I guess some of that you can define up front when you're thinking about a product in business terms, sort of what's our requirements on the nature of this data, the quality, etc. And then I want to know that when I get access to that product, it's going to be of suitable quality, well maintained, etc.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So again, I think data modeling can really help. I mean, the whole sort of idea around good data modeling, certainly in ER Studio, is we've got a tool that will take you through the process of taking requirements through to a design. Great, but we want to reuse architectural patterns in our designs and get that standardization. I think that can really help sort of break down some of those silos. We're having some good conversations with customers on sort of how do you define sort of these common data models, these domain models, these enterprise models.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having that clearly documented and planned is so important because even when we, like actually act on those things, it's easy to kind of forget like the bigger picture or why we decided to make those things and do those things in the first place. So like having that to be able to reference the original plan is like super important.
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think all sort of outputs of your modern data stack are going to be tied up in as products, or will there still be sort of other outputs?
I think probably a little bit of both. I think it's important to still use what you've built in the past and continue like iterating for the future. A lot of times companies, when they are like rethinking their modern data stack and kind of going back to that initial data modeling too, they're kind of dealing with a state of their legacy code and kind of building for the future. And you kind of have to learn to work with both.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting challenge as to how will data models solve that. I mean, there's a data product story you can clearly see, yeah, good data modeling, good architecture is really going to help there. But that other stuff, the legacy stuff, does that also fit into the same set of models, do you think?
I guess it depends. I think they typically legacy things aren't built with like the same standards and practices that you have with the newer things, like once you make the conscious decision to data model. So I think you kind of need to evaluate how it's like working for you, and while kind of understanding that, hey, maybe this needs to be changed in the future. We just might not have the time and the space to do that right now.
So a modern data stack might have a combination of sort of sections to it, then a sort of a well-governed, well-defined set of data product deliveries and other stuff.
Yeah, I think that's just kind of inevitable in the data world because you're always going to kind of have legacy things, just like, software always has legacy code that, that you plan to get rid of and rewrite, but sometimes it doesn't always get prioritized.
Yeah, I guess that presents a bit of a challenge if you've got an existing sort of brownfield setup, an existing warehouse, and we want to move to a modern sort of cloud-based data stack. Sort of how do we go about that? I guess we're going to want to go through the old stuff and figure out which bits we keep and migrate across alongside designing all the new world.
Yeah, exactly. I think sometimes too, which might not be the answer for everyone, but sometimes it is good to just like start from scratch, and it's just too much work to kind of untangle what the past is, and then, you know, it might not even be accurate anymore. So like, again, that's like why it's so important to have those conversations with stakeholders, because you can kind of get that context of, does it make sense to even kind of try to salvage what we've had in the past, or should we just kind of set a new standard and move forward?
Yeah, that makes sense. Back to those goals again. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So back to data modeling then. We as a sort of data modeling tool vendors sort of have this sort of ivory tower idea where we create this beautiful, great big enterprise data model, and it's all a sort of top-down exercise. I think the real world needs to be a bit more pragmatic. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is important to start with like an end goal, but you also need to think about what's realistic and like look at the data that you have available and how much time it's actually going to take, because I think everyone has an idea of like the big data model that they want at the end that can answer all their problems, but in reality, like a data team doesn't have like 6 months to build their ideal data model that can answer every question. So kind of looking at it and starting in stages of whether it's like a specific product domain, whether you're focused on a specific success metric, and kind of working your way backwards is typically the way to do it.
Nice. I think, yeah, there's definite validity in some things. Great, our common models, those enterprise models contains everything we need. We'll start from those and work down. Other things, other products, other outputs we might sort of design in isolation, but then we can go ahead afterwards and say, hey, there's some of this we want to promote into our enterprise models and make it reusable. If data is truly sort of a data product is independent, isolated, and never going to be connected to anything else, might be some data that comes from the lake, for instance, then fine, that can exist in its own little niche. But I think quite often data is going to be connected to other stuff and could be part of a bigger picture.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's also important to like actually look at what the business is using, because you might have an idea of what you think the business wants, and then that's not actually what they end up using. So it's like important to go back and reiterate on what actually is working and what maybe should be put more focus on based off of like how your first iteration is doing with the business.
Nice. All right, so there's a bit of an elephant in the room. We're all hearing about AIs. Do we need all these analysts? Can we just sort of just point an AI to our data and it's going to tell us all about our customers and our products and give us all the insights we need? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think with AI, it makes data modeling even more important, because AI isn't going to be able to just like look at your raw data and understand the business and connect all these pieces. You really need to be having those conversations with stakeholders. And I think that's kind of where the power of data people is like really lies with the future, and AI is having these conversations with different stakeholders and picking up all of that historical context and like different data quality issues and seeing how that is actually being shown in your raw data and then being able to model it. I think that's kind of where the power really lies, because if your AI is acting on bad quality data and they don't have all of the business context, it's not going to be able to create something that you can then use.
Love it. Yeah, I mean, AI to us is massive. We've sort of got two threads that we're looking at, sort of AI within the tool to help with the modeling process. Can we make it easier for business people to use? And can we get to models quicker and easier? But there's then, as you say, the using the data models to help an AI. So yeah, I think if we've got a good set of enterprise level, common domain level logical models, all in business language, with good business metadata against them, with useful metadata like sort of the policies and the rules connected into the business glossary. We're looking at ways of sort of articulating that so that we can give it to an AI to train it.
Yeah, I do think that poses another interesting point with like AI will absolutely help data people move way faster, whether it's through documentation, data modeling, like adding AI tools to the modern data stack is going to be really beneficial and like allow you to have even more impact with those conversations that you're having with stakeholders.
So, I mean, back to the data platform, the data stack itself. I mean, do we still need that stack, or can we just sort of point the AI to our raw data? What does the warehouse at the center, the lake house, what benefits does that give the AI?
Yeah, so you are kind of defining all of the metrics and the business logic using the raw data rather than just pointing AI to the raw data. So it's like it's adding that business context that you are getting from those conversations to make sure you're having something clean that AI can then use and that you feel confident with the results that you're actually getting with that data. Whereas if you're pointing it to raw data, it can be kind of a little bit of a mess. A little bit of a black box, I guess. You don't necessarily know what you're getting and if you can trust it, but if you're controlling the inputs and kind of baking in that business logic and that data quality, then you can be more confident in what AI is producing on top of that data.
That makes sense. So we're not going to get rid of warehouses and lake houses. And I think what you're saying is we need more data modeling.
Absolutely.
Very good. Takeaways for everybody then. What should everyone walk away with today?
I think definitely don't be afraid to push the business as a data person to focus on data modeling earlier. Again, like it might take a little bit of politics, but it is truly something that you will thank yourself and the business will thank you. And I think as data people, we really have the responsibility of like helping execs and maybe people that don't have this deep understanding of data, that this stuff is so important and it will help, again, you slow down to move faster in the long run and really be able to scale your data stack.
Nice. So doing the hard yards up front means we're going to be enjoying more speed and trust later on.
Yep,
we're going to get better quality. We're going to be able to deliver faster. We're going to be able to govern it better, and our AIs are going to enjoy the benefits of this and give us much better quality output.
Yep, I think every data person kind of faces the lesson of like, oh wow, I should have modeled this data sooner. So if you can realize that earlier on, rather than like going through the painful process of finding that out the hard way, then I think you're good to go.
Beautiful. So modeling is going to slow us down. It's actually going to speed us up. I like it. I like it. Ryan, I think that's about us done. Do we have any questions from the audience that we can?
Yeah, it's been a great conversation. Really appreciate it, guys. Yeah, I want to open it up now. If anyone in the audience has any questions, please feel free to put it in the question prompt box. And as we kind of wait for that, Madison, awesome stuff. Thanks so much for your time. And a couple questions came to my mind as we're talking through this. So we obviously talked about just how important it is that we have consistent definitions, requirements across the board. But in your experience, as an analyst, whether these were real world examples or even hypotheticals, like what are some actual examples that you would go to a CEO or a CFO and say, hey, if you don't get these everything in line, these are the risks that are going to be at play. Like what are some, either financial, time, error, actually risk errors that they would be facing if not everything is aligned within their business?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest thing is acting on data that isn't actually true or reliable. So With that comes money, whether you're spending money on ads that you think are going to be successful or have been successful in the past, and that's not actually the truth, or whether you're incorrectly measuring your MRR and then like using that to determine the products that you're then investing in. I think time and money is probably the biggest thing, and like whether you're going down the right or the wrong path as a business, because data does inform, or it should inform, every decision that you are making in terms of like the products that you're producing, the ads that you're spending money on, like your sales strategy. I think everything really comes back to data. And if you are making the wrong business decisions based off of inconsistent data, then you're spending time and money and resources on areas that you shouldn't be.
Makes sense. Good stuff. Okay, and then you also mentioned, as an analytics engineer, you typically came in at a pivot point when the teams learned, like, wow, we really got to kind of scale. But you also mentioned the toughest part was kind of the political side of things, getting everyone kind of on board and together. Like, so what was your strategy? Like, did you kind of get all the department heads like in a meeting together on a video call and kind of talk through the importance, or like how did you try and get everyone aligned to really implement your strategy?
I think it's really important to meet people where they're at. And I think like when someone comes to you with a problem, you kind of want to really take the time to just understand it. Like, what have they been facing in the past? What are they currently facing? Like, what are their biggest pain points? And understanding that kind of helps you think about how you can then solve their problems with data, and like where the different commonalities are in between business teams. So like rather than sitting everyone down and being like, hey, this is a mess, it makes sense to kind of like focus on each individual person that you're working with, I think, and like trying to figure out their problems and then how you can solve those problems in like a more autonomous way, and like different strategies that you have to make long term. So I think it definitely starts like at the smallest layer and then kind of trickles its way up, I think is the best way to do it. And I like to approach all of those conversations too with thinking of like, how can I educate these stakeholders to also feel empowered with data and not like it's something that they can't trust or something that they don't want to touch? Like, how can I make them actually want to have better data practices? And I think that's really helpful, because that's not just putting it on you, but it's also helping them kind of be able to solve their own problems that are related to data, and then want to avoid those problems in the future by then supporting like the different decisions and ideas that you have to make data more usable throughout the company.
There's some
Awesome.
great questions coming in from the audience here. So there's one here that sort of, when you were describing what is a modern data stack, I was kind of thinking of. So the question is, are there parts of the modern data stack narrative that you think are overhyped? I was kind of thinking as you were describing it, is it just about sort of the cloud technology and the sort of the open source tools, or is there more to it than that? This smells just like a standard data warehouse or lakehouse? What's different?
Yeah, again, like I think it's about just accessibility and like ease of use. I think one thing that I've loved about the modern data stack is like when I first started out as an analytics engineer, I could figure out how to do everything myself. It's not like I was, hard coding everything and like needed a PhD to build all these intricate data systems. Like I think truly the level of accessibility has gone up to like just the average engineer, or like even a data analyst or someone with an untraditional tech background. Like you really have the ability to be as hands-on or as hands-off as you want with these tools, and it just gives you a lot of confidence in the data stack that you're building.
Nice. Another question, what trends or technologies do you think will define the next modern data stack? Where are we going, do you think? What's your vision for the future?
Yeah, I think before it was common to have like 10 different modern data stack tools and to have a bunch of tools for the sake of having tools. But I think we're seeing more and more companies consolidate and realize, okay, we don't need 10 different tools to solve the problem. Like we're going to pick maybe 4 or 5 core things that really work together and work well and that we can like actually maintain, because I think previously we wanted to add like 10 different tools. I think there's some echo, I don't know.
From Ryan's side.
Oh. But I think people wanted to previously add like 10 different tools and then they weren't able to consistently maintain them. So now like people are realizing like we need to be able to maintain these tools and maintain them well. So consolidation, and then I think we're going to see more and more AI tools that are kind of working across the entire data stack and making sure different pieces are talking to each other. So like you typically have a data warehouse, a data ingestion tool, a data transformation tool, and maybe like an orchestration and BI tool. And previously they were all kind of siloed, and like sometimes there was ways to understand how they all interacted with one another, but now we're really going to see AI tools that help you debug across this entire data stack and help really maintain consistency through all those different pieces.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, in terms of the sort of the platforms, you'd be seeing Microsoft and Snowflake and all these sort of different platforms all providing more and more tools to sort of contribute to this journey. So that makes sense from a sort of technology standpoint. But I think from the overall sort of mission, what are you going to put through the sausage machine? The problem stays the same, and I'm liking the sort of new focus on sort of delivering value to the business. This sort of data as a product approach seems good. And again, back to our original point, I don't think we're going to get away from data modeling. I think data modeling has got to get easier to use. It's got to get more AI driven. It's got to get more integrated with the data governance platforms and the technologies.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Good. Another question here. Oh, this is an interesting one. If you had a blank canvas, what would your ideal data platform look like? Wow.
Ooh, again, I think it depends on the company and what you're trying to solve. I feel like before I would answer that easily. Like, of course, I have a few favorite tools that I really like, but you shouldn't just be making decisions based off of your favorite tools. Like, it really has to be driven by the business and the business goals. And a lot of that is like, how much money do you have to spend? How much engineering resources do you have? Like, even that alone is going to determine whether you want a more enterprise tool or you want something that is open source. So that right there is like just a huge, simple question, but something that really will determine the state that you the direction that you move in with your tools.
Nice. Yeah, back to the hearts and minds stuff as well, isn't it? It's sort of who's going to get involved and what's their roles in this machine.
Yeah.
Cool. Ryan, any more questions from the audience there?
Yeah, I see. Okay, one more came in. Okay, what's one governance practice that really builds trust with stakeholders?
Ooh, that's a good one. Honestly, I think just having like self-service documentation is really important. Something that I noticed a lot in my last role is that I was kind of like the owner of a reverse ETL tool. So I would have like a data model that sent data to HubSpot, Intercom, and a lot of times stakeholders would come to me with questions about like how often this data was syncing, what does it actually mean, what's the calculation, and of course this was stuff that we had discussed, but it wasn't information that they then had readily available back to them to reference. So I would say that made a huge difference because they weren't having to feel like they were asking me all the time, and they could really feel empowered to understand the data that was coming in on their own.
See another question that's come in. What type of data model do you think would be a good fit for a modern data stack? So I think, to me, my answer to that would be the same data model that would drive any analytics program data warehouse. Again, starting from those sort of looser conceptual models to try and frame and decide on how do we satisfy the requirements of this data stack. Would you agree, Madison? There's
Yep.
no real difference in terms of what we do with data modeling.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it all comes back to the business and the goals of what you're trying to build.
Yeah, and then we get down all the way to the important bits of information, like what is a customer, what is a product, how do we identify one of these things across all the different systems, across the organization, what do we mean by customer lifetime value score or credit rating score, etc.
Yep.
It's all just good, standard, logical, business-driven data modeling.
Yep.
Very good. And then a follow-on question to that, sort of, what about Data Vault dimensional models? And I think all of those are kind of physicalizations of that basic logical model. So, I mean, in a medallion type structure, we've got different layers. And you make decisions on the architecture of that. So yeah, the silver layer, are we going to have a third normal form type structure for it, or are we going to have a data vault structure for it? On the gold layer, are we going to have a dimensional model? Are we going to create a whole pile of views? What are we going to do? I don't think that matters. It's all going to be driven from the same logical data model. Information is information. Let's understand, what is that information? What does it mean? How do you identify it? Those same standard questions. And then your modeling tool should help you then convert that logical model into a physicalization for whatever platform you've got.
Yep. Yeah, I think it also depends on, like, again, the tools that you have available and how you're going to be accessing that data as well.
Cool. And obviously ER Studio is an awesome tool for that. We've got gadgets that help you build data vault structures from your logical models. I mean, we're looking at AI for a lot of this stuff as well, sort of converting from one to the other. So yeah, again, AI supporting the whole process.
Yeah,
cool.
awesome tool.
I think we've only got a couple of minutes left, and Ryan, do you want to close us off?
Yep. Yeah, so I just wanted to share my screen. So thanks everyone for joining. We really appreciate your time. Madison, obviously, thanks so much for being our guest speaker today. A lot of valuable information here. Again, this webinar will be recorded and sent out to everyone via email. And again, visit erstudio.com, our events page. It'll be also located there. Yeah, if you have any other questions or want some more information on how we can help your data architecture, go ahead and scan this QR code and one of our experts will reach out to you. Otherwise, thanks again. Everyone have an awesome rest of your day.